What's up, agents, and welcome back to another Division video. After today's live stream, they very kindly published the Year 6 Season 2 PTS patch notes for Phase 2. So we're going to go through them, I'm going to give you my thoughts, and we're going to see what we think might be the highlights of the PTS when it goes live tomorrow. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and let's get straight into it. Now, they've made a bunch of different changes in here to do with weapons. So I am going to go through them separately in separate videos. I might bunch a few together because I might do like ARs, SMGs, and LMGs together and things like that. So I'll go over them in detail later. I have got IKEA's sheet. I think he's already updated his anyway, so we might have a look at before and after and see if we can gauge of a, you know, an idea of what it is they're trying to do a little bit better rather than just having the first set of data which we had in the last PTS. With that said, let's get straight into it. So 18 gig update if you've already got the PTS, 97 gig if you have not, and it goes live tomorrow at 1 PM CEST, which is midday if you're in the UK. They did mention here that these patch notes include only the changes made in response from feedback from PTS Phase 1. Everything else has been the same, but there is quite a bit to look at. First of all, there is the seasonal modifiers. They've revised all the modifiers descriptions. I don't know why. Maybe they're easier to read now. But then they talked about satellite coating modifier. They've updated the description for the sterile coating. Reduced rifle and marksman rifle per bullet scaling against... Is it... Hang on. Is it satellite or they just miss... Or sterile? Stellite. Anyway. They've spelled that differently, right? Or am I just seeing that wrong? Yeah, they have spelled it differently. SATE there and just STE here. So I'm not going back to the VOD to check which one it is, but either way, that's what it's called. But they've reduced the rifle and marksman rifles per bullet scaling against it for enemies from ×10 to ×2. The damage from the wrong zone will be increased from 10 to 40%. Holy moly, that is a lot of damage. Yeah, that might feel rough. That might be too much. Then hostile countermeasures. Hostile countermeasures can now be found on legendary difficulty. More enemy types are now equipped with hostile countermeasures. Hostile countermeasures apply chances are now scaling with the world difficulty. All right, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So are we going to say that Master's probably 100%? Every enemy has it? Wow, that sounds like it might be tough if it is 100%. Legendary at 95% is pretty tough. So I guess we'll see. Black Tusk Assault and Thrower are no longer eligible for the coating. They will now have either Master of None or the requital modifiers instead. Okay. Reduce the likelihood of enemies having the stillite coating. That's what we're going to call it from now on, the stillite coating. I guess this is wrong up here. Modifier on higher difficulty levels such as heroic. Tweak the cooldown values of active modifiers. All now have the same cooldown of 55 seconds. Alright, so I mean that's going to be interesting. I think this could feel very rough. The increased zone damage from 10 to 40. 10% was already rough. You already died very quickly. So 40% feels like, yeah, it's going to get really difficult. But I guess we'll see. Priority objectives, they implemented the abandon feature. They've removed settlement blockade as an activity type. That's good because otherwise you could get locked out for weeks. Added Jefferson Plaza as a main mission type objective to the Washington DC pool. I guess that was just a mistake that it was just missing. Alright, so the Legatus is now going to be 30% swap speed, 70% optimal range, up from 50, which is pretty crazy. And then 3 pieces equipped is going to be 15% weapon damage, which I think is the same. Amplified total weapon damage for 10 seconds when swapping between your primary and secondary if they are different. 45% to enemies within 15 meters for shotguns and SMGs, but then 35% for PvP. 45% for enemies further than 25 meters for rifles and marksmen. 35% from enemies further for PvP. 20% for enemies between 15 and 25 meters for LMGs and ARs. Once at most once per 5 seconds per weapon type. I still don't think that's great. I still think perfect. I think versatile needs looking at, you know, generally, and I think them adding to it now is just, yeah, I don't know. The named mask 50% optimal range. We couldn't test that anyway, but the optimal range is huge. Huge. This is 70. Does optimal range go over 100%? I guess maybe it does. We have to test, but yeah, that's pretty wild. Right, okay, so the Virtuoso gear set. 2-piece is 15% weapon handling and magazine size. 3-piece is 15% weapon damage. And then we've got the 4-piece, which is Symphony. Killing an enemy further than 25 meters will now provide a 40% damage to shotguns, SMGs, pistols, 20% damage to ARs and LMGs, and 25% bonus armor for 15 seconds. Killing an enemy within 25 meters gives you a 40% weapon damage to marksman rifles and rifles, 20% weapon damage to ARs and LMGs, 30% for headshot damage. What was that? I'm just going to put it over to the other screen. Alright, so now I can tell you what it is at the same time. So further than, so the enemy, it was further, so it was further than 30 meters, but it was 40%, and it was 30%, so give it a 10% damage buff. Same with this, is now a 10% damage buff. And they've given the ARs a 5% damage buff. So they've added damage to that across the board. I wonder if that's going to be good now. Double the weapon damage with Symphony is still the same. And then they've changed this from 4 to 3. That's going to be interesting to test out if this is actually enough damage now. I think maybe not. Headshot damage has stayed the same, but it's now for 15 seconds. I think it likely needs to be 20 seconds. Maybe a teensy wincy bit more weapon damage, but I guess we'll have to test it and see. Right, so the Centurion's holster. What have they made different here? Okay, so they've added PvP bonuses to this now. So this has stayed the same. This has stayed the same. The bonuses will remain active for 12 seconds, and it was 8. So that they've made this better. But they've now applied PvP modifiers. Good shout. I think this is good. Then the exotic file, they talked about this today. The mods were kept the same. The only thing they've done, they kept the damage the same. And they've reduced the range. It was going to be 20 meters, but it was indefinite on the last PTS. And multiple marks could be stacked on the same enemy. Now that's going to be capped also. But they've made the range 10 meters. So I think it'll still be as good. I don't think that's terrible. I think that's probably okay. Sledgehammer has been, well, technically reduced in damage. But it still works as a group. So that's kind of fine, right? It's gone down to, you know, from 30% to 20 for the perfect version, 15 for the regular version. But if you really want to get that extra damage, you can use Mosquito Song, which is now being which is staying the same, and they stack together. Yannick confirmed that today. So yeah, that's a massive win. Right, okay, then we've got rifles. They've changed the 1886 damage here. So if I just very quickly pull up the weapons, and I will do their own, you know, best in slot kind of video. But I'll just tell you what they've changed it from and to. So rifles, 1886. Okay, so The 1886 damage has been brought down. So it was 429880. And it's now been brought down to 386892. It's still very good. It's still getting a decent buff. But they've not changed anything else since the last PTS. So I'll do the tables for this and we'll look at the burst and sustain DPS. We'll have a look at that in more detail, or maybe we'll borrow Ikea's if he's already updated his. Marksman rifles have had a little bit of a switch around also. So they changed the SR1. So the SR1 is not getting as big of a nerf as it was previously. It was going to go down to 373,700. It's now not. It's still in the 40Ks now. So that's not been hit quite as hard. The M700 was going to go down to 399. It's now not. It's now going down to 412. So that's not as bad of a. So it's like they went in really low, and then due to feedback they brought them up. The SRS is the same story. That's been brought up. That was going to go down to 380. It's now going down to 409. And then the .308. It was going to go down to 313. That was going down really low, but it's now, I mean, I don't know why they put it as red, right? If this is what it is now, it's going to 403. So this is a bigger number. So this should be green. It's getting a buff. It's getting a buff. So, yeah. That's obviously a mistake on their behalf, I think. All right, so then shotties. So a lot of people were unhappy with this category, but let's have a look what they've done. Hopefully they've undone some of the stuff that they have done. ARs, SMGs, LMGs, rifles, MRs, shotties. Right, okay, so they changed the double barrel. So that was going to go up. I mean, double barrel looks the same to me. 677979. Something's wrong there because that looks the same on both the PTS1 and PTS sheets. The sawn off as well looks exactly no, it doesn't, ever so slightly. So it was going to go to 635,584. Now going to 635,700. So like 200 difference in damage. Don't quite understand the point in doing that, but whatever. The sausage. So the sausage was going down to 317. It's now going down to 349. Hardly a nerf at all. So that's a very, very tiny nerf. So that's better. The Super 90 was getting absolutely clapped. It was going to go down to 354. It's now going down to 389. So still a decent clapping, but it might actually still be worth using. So we'll definitely have a look at the sheet for that later on. The Spaz was going to 715. The Spaz is going to 715. Yeah, that was going to get a huge buff to 795. And now it's going to 715. So they've decided to clap that buff. Still getting a buff, but nowhere near as big as what it was before. And then the KSG was getting a really nice buff. They've definitely pulled back on that. It was going to 754. It's now only going to 678. So that's interesting. The pistols, they've included the harvest. So the harvest wasn't in the last set of pistols, I don't think. Let me just double check. ARs, SMGs, LMGs, rifles, MMR, shotguns, pistols. Yeah, because it wasn't out, I don't think, or it just come out at the time. So they've added the harvest. The harvest sits down here, and when that's going to be in, it's definitely still going to be better than the D50, and it's still better than the Magnum. The harvest is still going to be best in slot, and a lot of people were unable to get it or get a damage target out of cover version because you couldn't farm it. So if you've got one of these, look at the rate of fire as well. Decent reload speed like that. I'm going to do a video on that alone because I think that's wild, absolutely wild. MP7 was getting absolutely clapped. So it's still getting a nerf, but it was going to go down to MP7 was going to go to 44186. So, alright, so yeah, nowhere near as big. Nowhere near as big as the nerf it was getting. It was unholy. So, yeah, hopefully that will look better in the spreadsheets as well also. Alright, so weapon mods. Optimal range mod. Wow. What is going on with this optimal range? Yeah, that's wild. 70% optimal range from a magazine. Yeah, we need to check out what's going on with they must see something in optimal range that we don't, I guess. Then the tactical short grip's getting 15% crit damage. That might be worth looking at. That's pretty good. Obliterate War is now being brought up to okay, so it's going to be increased critical hits, weapon damage for 1% for 5 seconds up to 20 times. So it's getting 5% weapon damage taken off it. Not terrible anymore. The 17 was way too harsh. Perfect Allegro, which was probably going to make the invisible hand usable, is getting clapped. That went up to 20%. It's not anymore. It's going to 15%. It will now stay in everybody's stash. Sadist. Right. So what were they going to do with Sadist? So I'm going to find what they was going to do with it. Because if I remember rightly, Sadist was getting a really, really nice change. And I've got a funny feeling that they're clapping the change that they were doing. So, talents will be on this one. Oh, they've removed it. They've removed it from the Trello. Why would they do that? Oh, hang on, maybe it just didn't load. Alright, so talent. So here we go. So obliterate, that's fine. Safeguard. Accurate. Ignitist, optimist. Where's their mate? Wicked. I don't know why I was looking for Wicked when it's Sadist. Right, okay, so Sadist was being changed to amplifies weapon damage for 30%, 35 for the perfect. So that's staying the same. In PvP. So that's staying the same. So why has that gone in again? So we need to check out why that has gone in again, because that reads the same as the PTS1 patch notes. Exactly the same. But they said they only put things in that were changes. So that's interesting. So we need to check that out. That definitely needs to go on the list. Brazen. Let's have a look what they changed here. So Brazen was received 3.5 amp damage. Yep, that's the same. On your next shot for the weapon for each pellet that hits. 6-4. So that's the same. But they've added PvP. They have actually added PvP modifiers to this. So they've got lower PvP modifiers. 2% for the regular, 3 for the perfect version. So that wasn't in PTS1. So that's what they've added there. Heartbreaker, unfortunately, they've taken down to 1.1. They did have it to 1.3, and I don't really understand why they would do this. I think at 1.3, it definitely wasn't overpowered. It definitely felt okay. I don't know who gave feedback saying it was too powerful. Seems odd. I would love to know why. 1.1 is nothing at all, and it'll just keep it in the trash bin, especially with the change to strikers to 0.9. I think this definitely needs to be pushed to 1.3. I'd have pushed it to 1.5. Yeah, I think 1.1 is nowhere near enough. So we'll have to check it out, and we'll do some damage numbers. But I think, yeah, I don't know. I don't understand the Heartbreaker change. This is a great change. They've added rifle damage to the 2-piece bonus for aces and 8s. Definitely was needed. That might be worthwhile now. The extra 15% on them damage numbers work great. Then we've got the strikers change to 0.9 instead of 1. I think that's probably much better. But like I said, yeah, the Heartbreaker, they've got they was in a right good place at 1.3, and now I think, yeah, maybe not. So this is a little bit strange. So they have gone straight back into the changes again with more of the brand set changes. I didn't really play around with these too much. I don't know if you guys did, but they've buffed again Alps. So it was going to be 16.6. It's now going to be 18%. Electric had nothing at all. That's now getting a nerf. The status effects are going down to 8.33 for some reason. Empress International. That was going to be 5% skill efficiency. That is still a nerf, but they brought it up to 8. So they've brought that up from the PTS1. Murakami from PTS1, they brought it up to 35% rather than 30. It was going to be 33.3. So okay, and then Wyvern gear. So the Wyvern was going to get changed to 5% skill damage. It's still a nerf. It's going to be 8, but again they brought it up. They thought it was too harsh. They also buff it even more. It was going to be 16.6 status effects. It's now going to be 18%. So yeah, double buff the, well, ish. One buff, one not so buff. Then we've got Golan, which is down here. So let me switch to the other page for Golan. So Golan was going to be... Alright, so Golan is just being put back to what it was. So they were going to nerf the status effects. They're not now. That's good. Then Seska. What have they changed for Seska again? So Seska was going to be 6.5% critical hit chance. They brought it up to 8. Provi looks very red. So they were going to change it to 13% headshot. So they brought the crit chance up. They were going to take it to 6.5. They're now only taking it to 8. Everything, the crit damage is staying at 13%. And then Sokolov was going to be 10, 13. Oh, right. Okay, so they were going to nerf the crit chance down to 6.5%. They're now only taking it down to 8. So they went too far in PTS phase 1. They've obviously seen that, and they brought a lot of the changes, not all the way back up, but they brought them, you know, at least to the halfway mark. Now this is going to 1367, much better than what it was going to be. Yeah, you know, up here. No, what it is, sorry, at the moment is 1367. It's now going to be 2469. So yeah, I don't think this is terrible. I don't think this is terrible. I would prefer it if it was 2468. The OCD in me, 2469 makes no sense, but 2468 would be better. But it's been 2469. I'm probably going to recommend it, but 2468. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. But at least they've undone it. I think Scorpio will still be very, very versatile. Very, very versatile. Then they give us this, which they didn't give us before. So it will be nice to perhaps do a spreadsheet for, you know, exotics and comparing them, you know, although they're outside each other's, you know, maybe we compare SMGs to ARs a little bit and LMGs a little bit and see. So we've got some really good data for them, but there's no point going into that right now. But yeah, so that all stays the same, right? So the only thing they've obviously undone is the 10 rounds on the St. Elmo and the Ouroboros, which is why they're in here. But one thing to note is that the Ouroboros, where is it? Ouroboros, where are you? Right, so the Ouroboros, oh, so it has been changed. So when these notes first came out, this here said 1275. It's been changed to 1250 since. So they have made that change down to 1250, because obviously they said that in the dev notes yesterday that it was going to be, you know, from 1275 down to 1250. I did a video the other day showing that it was 1250 in the PTS already anyway. It was never 1275, but they've since changed it, and it is, yeah, 1250. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to have a look at that. I think it needs to be 1275. But, yeah, we'll have a look. I'll do some more videos a bit later on about the different weapon archetypes. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below for the PTS, and I will try and cover off as much as I can over the next 3 days. Thank you for watching, agents. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.